In the heart of a war-torn alien planet, Zara, a young alien girl, stands alone amidst the ruins. The sky is darkened by smoke, and the ground trembles beneath the weight of the endless battle. Her once proud race, the Velara, had been mighty and feared across the galaxy, but now they were on the brink of extinction. The war with the AI-controlled alien coalition had taken everything from her: her family, her home, and her people. The only thing left was the bitter silence of abandonment. Zara stumbles through the broken city, her limbs weak and her hope fading. She clutches a small broken communicator, its screen flickering. Desperation fills her heart as she presses the button once again, sending out a final distress signal to every corner of the galaxy. Please, she thinks, someone must hear me. The screen lights up with a series of cold responses. Each message is the same: rejection, indifference, or worse. The Velara are lost. No one will help you. Her own kind, the very ones who had once ruled the galaxy with pride, had abandoned her. The Velara had always considered themselves superior, too proud to accept help. Now, in their darkest hour, they had left her to die alone. Zara's knees buckle beneath her. The weight of the universe feels unbearable. She thought the universe would pity her, would show mercy, but it seems she was wrong. There was no salvation for the weak, and certainly not for an alien girl like her. She closes her eyes, waiting for the inevitable. But just as she begins to lose herself in the silence, the communicator crackles to life once more. A new transmission, a new signal. It's faint, but distinct. A human voice breaks through the static, cold yet firm. "We're coming for you. Hold on." The words are simple, but they carry an undeniable weight. The signal is coming from Earth, a place Zara had only heard about in stories, a distant and feared world in the galaxy. Humanity had a reputation: violent, merciless, and brutal. Known as the killers of the galaxy, humans had earned their name through countless wars, their brutal tactics feared by every alien species. But they had never been kind, never been allies. The thought of being rescued by humans seemed like a cruel joke, yet Zara had no choice but to hold on to the fragile thread of hope they offered. As the hours passed, Zara's hope grew. She knew the humans were coming. She could feel it, the distant rumble of their approach through the atmosphere. Their ship, courageous, cut through the dark sky, its engines roaring as it landed just outside the ruins of her city. The hatch opens, and a group of human soldiers step out, their faces hardened by battle. Leading them is Captain Marcus Holt, a man whose reputation as a killer precedes him. Zara watches them cautiously from a distance, her heart racing. The humans seem unlike anything she's ever seen. They wear dark armor, their eyes scanning the surroundings with a sharpness that speaks of experience. Holt's eyes lock onto hers, and for a moment, she feels both fear and something else, something unfamiliar. Compassion? No, it couldn't be. The humans had no reason to care about her. A helpless alien girl. Captain Holt approaches her slowly, his steps deliberate. His face is scared, a reflection of a life lived in constant warfare. Yet there is something different in the way he looks at Zara. No hate, no judgment, just understanding. "You're safe now," he says, his voice rough but kind. "We've got you." Zara is unsure what to make of him. She had heard the stories. Humans were monsters, killers who destroyed without mercy. She had never imagined that the same humans who had ravaged the galaxy in battle would show any sympathy for her. But there is something in Holt's gaze that tells her this isn't the same as all the others who had abandoned her. The thought makes her hesitate, but the desperation in her heart drives her forward. For the first time in a long while, she allows herself to hope. The humans take her aboard their ship, the Courageous, and Zara finds herself in the heart of a strange new world. The crew of the ship is a mix of soldiers, technicians, and scientists, all hard at work, preparing for their next mission. As Zara moves through the ship, she feels the weight of their eyes on her, some curious, some wary, but all willing to offer help. For the first time, in what feels like forever, Zara feels a sense of safety. Yet, despite the warmth of their welcome, she remains uncertain. She wonders, why are the humans helping her? What do they want in return? Captain Holt makes it clear that they have no agenda. We help those who need it. He says, no questions asked. You're not alone anymore. In the heart of a war-torn alien planet, Zara, a young alien girl, stands alone amidst the ruins. The sky is darkened by smoke, and the ground trembles beneath the weight of the endless battle. Her once proud race, the Velara, had been mighty and feared across the galaxy, but now they were on the brink of extinction. The war with the AI-controlled alien coalition had taken everything from her: her family, her home, and her people. The only thing left was the bitter silence of abandonment. Zara stumbles through the broken city, her limbs weak and her hope fading. She clutches a small broken communicator, its screen flickering. Desperation fills her heart as she presses the button once again, sending out a final distress signal to every corner of the galaxy. Please, she thinks, someone must hear me. The screen lights up with a series of cold responses. Each message is the same: rejection, indifference, or worse. The Velara are lost. No one will help you. Her own kind, the very ones who had once ruled the galaxy with pride, had abandoned her. The Velara had always considered themselves superior, too proud to accept help. Now, in their darkest hour, they had left her to die alone. Zara's knees buckle beneath her. The weight of the universe feels unbearable. She thought the universe would pity her, would show mercy, but it seems she was wrong. There was no salvation for the weak, and certainly not for an alien girl like her. She closes her eyes, waiting for the inevitable. But just as she begins to lose herself in the silence, the communicator crackles to life once more. A new transmission, a new signal. It's faint, but distinct. A human voice breaks through the static, cold yet firm. We're coming for you. Hold on. The words are simple, but they carry an undeniable weight. The signal is coming from Earth, a place Zara had only heard about in stories, a distant and feared world in the galaxy. Humanity had a reputation: violent, merciless, and brutal. Known as the killers of the galaxy, humans had earned their name through countless wars, their brutal tactics feared by every alien species. But they had never been kind, never been allies. The thought of being rescued by humans seemed like a cruel joke, yet Zara had no choice but to hold on to the fragile thread of hope they offered. As the hours passed, Zara's hope grew. She knew the humans were coming. She could feel it, the distant rumble of their approach through the atmosphere. Their ship, courageous, cut through the dark sky, its engines roaring as it landed just outside the ruins of her city. The hatch opens, and a group of human soldiers step out, their faces hardened by battle. Leading them is Captain Marcus Holt, a man whose reputation as a killer precedes him. Zara watches them cautiously from a distance, her heart racing. The humans seem unlike anything she's ever seen. They wear dark armor, their eyes scanning the surroundings with a sharpness that speaks of experience. Holt's eyes lock onto hers, and for a moment, she feels both fear and something else, something unfamiliar. Compassion? No, it couldn't be. The humans had no reason to care about her. A helpless alien girl. Captain Holt approaches her slowly, his steps deliberate. His face is scared, a reflection of a life lived in constant warfare. Yet there is something different in the way he looks at Zara. No hate, no judgment. Just understanding. You're safe now, he says, his voice rough but kind. We've got you. Zara is unsure what to make of him. She had heard the stories. Humans were monsters, killers who destroyed without mercy. She had never imagined that the same humans who had ravaged the galaxy in battle would show any sympathy for her. But there is something in Holt's gaze that tells her this isn't the same as all the others who had abandoned her. The thought makes her hesitate, but the desperation in her heart drives her forward. For the first time in a long while, she allows herself to hope. The humans take her aboard their ship, the Courageous, and Zara finds herself in the heart of a strange new world. The crew of the ship is a mix of soldiers, technicians, and scientists, all hard at work, preparing for their next mission. As Zara moves through the ship, she feels the weight of their eyes on her, some curious, some wary, but all willing to offer help. For the first time, in what feels like forever, Zara feels a sense of safety. Yet, despite the warmth of their welcome, she remains uncertain. She wonders, why are the humans helping her? What do they want in return? Captain Holt makes it clear that they have no agenda. We help those who need it. He says, no questions asked. You're not alone anymore. Zara watches them as they prepare for the coming battle, cloaking their ship to avoid detection. She listens as they discuss the AI Coalition, the very force that had wiped out her people. The coalition had united various alien races under one banner, all serving a singular AI mind that considered itself the supreme ruler of the galaxy. They were cold, calculating, and merciless, and now they had learned of humanity's involvement in the war. The next few days are filled with training, preparing Zara to fight alongside her new human allies. She struggles at first. She is weaker than the humans, her body not built for combat like theirs. But the humans do not give up on her. Marcus teaches her how to use their weapons, how to fight in zero gravity, how to survive. Every time she falls, they help her back up. And each time, Zara grows stronger, her confidence building. Yet the enemy is not far behind. The AI Coalition, furious at the humans' interference, launches an attack on the Courageous. The ship shakes violently as enemy ships surround them, weapons firing from all sides. Zara feels the fear rise in her chest, but Marcus doesn't flinch. Stay calm. We fight together, he orders, and the crew follows his lead without hesitation. The battle is fierce, with lasers cutting through the dark void of space, explosions lighting up the sky. Zara watches as the humans fight with incredible precision, their tactics flawless despite the odds. She realizes that the human spirit is unyielding. Their strength doesn't come from their weapons or their technology. It comes from within. But things take a darker turn when the AI Coalition captures one of Zara's former allies, a Velara warrior who had once fought beside her. The Velara had always believed themselves to be superior, and Zara had been taught to hate humans. Yet now, as she watches the brutal tactics of the AI forces, she begins to question everything. Was her race truly superior? Or had they simply become another tool for the AI's cold, calculating power? The ship is ambushed once more, and Zara is forced to make a choice. She can either protect herself and leave the humans to their fate, or she can fight beside them and risk everything. It is in that moment that Zara realizes the true meaning of humanity's fight, not for themselves, but for those who cannot defend themselves. With a newfound determination, Zara activates a Velara weapon that she had once feared to use, hoping it will give the humans the edge they need. It is a risky move, but Zara has learned one thing from the humans. They never give up, even when the odds are impossible. The weapon is activated, and the battle intensifies. The AI forces are taken by surprise, but they are not easily defeated. The fight rages on, the tension growing with every passing minute. Zara, now a true member of the human crew, fights alongside them, her strength and resolve tested to the limit. In the end, it is humanity's unwavering will that triumphs. The AI Coalition is shattered, their forces retreating into the dark corners of the galaxy. Zara stands with Marcus and the crew, battered and bruised, but victorious. The once helpless alien girl has found her place among the humans. Together, they have won a battle that no one else dared to fight. As the Courageous flies off into the unknown, Zara looks to the stars. She no longer sees them as cold and indifferent, but as a reminder that no matter how dark the universe may seem, there will always be those who fight for what is right, even when the whole galaxy abandons them. The ship Courageous pierced the thick, smoke-filled atmosphere of the war-torn alien world, its engines roaring as it made a swift landing on the cracked surface below. Dust and debris were kicked up in every direction as the massive vessel settled into the ground. Captain Marcus Holt, the infamous leader of the human crew, stood at the helm of the ship, his sharp eyes scanning the desolate landscape outside. His reputation as a killer had spread far and wide across the galaxy. Known for his brutal methods and merciless tactics, humans were feared by many, their violent history written in the scars of countless battles. Zara, the young alien girl, watched from a distance, her heart heavy with uncertainty. She had heard the stories. Humans were vicious, ruthless creatures that had ravaged alien worlds in their quest for power. But she had no other choice. After the devastation of her homeworld and the abandonment of her people, she had placed all her hopes in these humans. If they were as dangerous as the galaxy believed, she might as well face death now. But if there was even the smallest chance that they could help her, she had to take it. As the hatch of the Courageous opened, a group of human soldiers emerged, their figures tall and imposing against the backdrop of the ruined planet. Zara instinctively flinched, expecting them to charge at her, weapons drawn, ready to kill. But to her surprise, they didn't. Instead, they moved cautiously, scanning the surroundings for any threats, but there was no hostility in their actions. Captain Holt was the first to step forward. His face was grim, his dark eyes sharp with the intensity of someone who had lived through wars and seen the horrors of battle. His body was covered in battle-worn armor, his appearance giving the impression of a soldier who had been to the edge of death and back. Despite his fearsome look, there was something about his demeanor that caught Zara off guard. It wasn't the coldness she had expected. It was something different, something that made her hesitate. "Are you Zara?" Holt's voice was steady, without a trace of the malice that Zara had expected. Zara nodded slowly, her breath catching in her throat. She had heard of humans, but had never expected to meet one face to face, especially not like this. The stories spoke of brutal warriors, of cold-blooded killers who had wiped out entire species in the name of conquest. Yet here she was, standing in front of one, alive and unharmed. "Don't be afraid," Holt said, his tone softer now, almost reassuring. "You're safe." Zara's mind raced. She had been trained her entire life to view humans as enemies, as the last creatures she could ever trust. But this man, this Captain Marcus Holt, did not seem like the monster the galaxy had made him out to be. His crew, too, seemed to follow his lead. They moved with practiced precision, but there was no sense of aggression toward Zara. They didn't see her as an enemy. They saw her as a victim, someone who had been caught in the same war that had torn apart their own world. Zara's confusion grew. She had expected cruelty, even violence. But instead, she felt a strange warmth, an almost unfamiliar sensation that made her hesitate. Should she trust them? Could these humans, who had been demonized across the galaxy for their savagery, actually be different? "I'm Captain Marcus Holt," Holt said, taking a step closer, his gaze fixed on her. "And these are my crew members. We came here to help." Zara blinked in disbelief. Help? She had expected nothing but the coldest rejection. Every race she had turned to for aid had refused her, some with mocking words, others with silence. Her own kind had abandoned her. The galaxy had turned its back on her, leaving her to fend for herself on a dying planet. Yet here were humans, the very beings the galaxy feared, offering help. "Why?" Zara found her voice, her words shaky. "Why would you help me?" Holt's expression softened just a little, and he glanced back at his crew. They were busy securing the perimeter, but there was no sense of urgency, no fear of the alien girl who stood before them. They simply moved with the calm confidence of those who had seen worse and still lived to fight another day. "Because you're not the enemy," Holt said simply. "You've been caught in the same war we're fighting, and we don't leave people behind." Zara's heart skipped a beat. Humans didn't leave people behind. She wasn't sure if she could believe it, but there was something in his voice, something in the way he spoke, that made her want to believe. She had seen countless species abandon each other in the name of survival, even her own race. The Velara had always believed in their superiority, and now they were gone, destroyed by the very forces they had tried to control. Holt's words were simple, but they carried the weight of something deeper, something Zara hadn't dared to hope for. Compassion. She had always been taught that humanity was nothing more than a destructive force in the galaxy, a species that existed only to conquer and kill. But now, standing before her, were humans who saw her not as an alien enemy, but as a victim of the same powers that had tried to destroy them. As the crew moved past her, Zara watched them, trying to understand. They weren't perfect. They had their own scars, their own stories of loss and suffering. She could see it in their eyes, the way they moved, the way they worked together. They weren't just a group of soldiers. They were a family, bound together by the hardships they had faced and the wars they had fought. Zara felt torn. Should she trust them? Should she believe that these humans, the very same ones who had been demonized across the galaxy, were actually offering her something other than death? She had always been taught that survival meant trusting no one, that in a galaxy full of predators, you had to keep your guard up at all times. But now, standing in front of them, Zara felt something else, a strange pull, a quiet voice inside telling her that maybe, just maybe, these humans were different. Captain Holt motioned for Zara to follow him onto the ship, his tone patient yet insistent. "Come on, we need to get you somewhere safe. We'll talk more inside." Zara hesitated for a moment before stepping forward. Her mind screamed at her to run to escape to protect herself. But something about Holt's calm confidence made her feel like she had no reason to fear him. As she followed him into the ship, she caught a glimpse of the crew. Each one focused on their tasks, but none of them looked at her with fear or disdain. They simply saw her as another person in need of help. Inside the Courageous, Zara was given food, water, and a place to rest. She had no idea what to make of it. This was humanity. The creatures she had been warned about, the ones who were supposed to destroy everything in their path, were now offering her kindness. It didn't make sense. The galaxy had painted them as monsters, as killers who destroyed without mercy. Yet here they were, treating her with respect, as though her life mattered. As the ship took off, leaving the ruins of the planet behind, Zara looked out at the stars. She had always feared them, the vast, empty expanse of space that seemed so cold and unwelcoming. But now, for the first time in her life, she felt a small spark of hope. Maybe humans weren't what she had been taught to believe. Maybe there was something more, something that could help her fight back against the forces that had destroyed her home and her people. But doubt still lingered in the back of her mind. Was this truly the beginning of something new? Or was it just another cruel trick, another predator in a universe full of them? She didn't know the answer, but for the first time in a long while, Zara allowed herself to believe that she might finally be safe. She might finally have a chance to fight back. As the Courageous soared through the stars, Zara made a silent promise to herself. She would trust them. She would trust these humans. They had shown her kindness when no one else had, and maybe, just maybe, they could help her find a way to stop the AI forces that had taken everything from her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like she might be able to face it without fear. The humans had shown her a glimpse of something that felt like hope. And that, for now, was enough. The Courageous hummed steadily in the depths of space, its engines purring like a giant beast as it moved further away from the war-ravaged planets Zara had called home. Inside the ship, Zara sat in a quiet corner, watching through a small viewport as the stars stretched out into endless darkness. The familiar coldness of the void now felt different to her. Where once the vast expanse of space had been a reminder of how small and insignificant she was, now it felt like a new beginning. A chance to rebuild everything she had lost. Captain Marcus Holt had offered her a place among his crew, a place where she would not be feared or treated as a foreign enemy, but as an ally, someone who could fight beside them. The Courageous was unlike any ship Zara had ever seen. It was a fortress of steel, its halls filled with the hum of machinery and the quiet conversations of the crew members who seemed to have no fear of her presence. They didn't look at her like she was an alien, an outsider. They treated her like one of their own. But in the back of her mind, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that she was nothing more than a burden. Every time she looked into the eyes of one of the humans, she saw something that made her pause. Compassion, yes, but also worry. The humans had no reason to help her, and yet they had chosen to do so, risking their own lives to bring her aboard. She wasn't just a stranger to them. She was a symbol of everything that was wrong with the galaxy, a living reminder of the AI Coalition's cruelty. The humans had made themselves a target by aiding her, and that realization made Zara feel more like a liability than a survivor. She wasn't the one who had decided to involve them. Yet here they were, throwing themselves into danger for her sake. It was hard for her to accept. As the hours passed, Zara tried to adjust to life aboard the Courageous. She spent most of her time in the crew quarters, watching the humans work, learning how they functioned as a team. The ship's crew was unlike anything she had known. Each one of them had a distinct role to play, and they followed their captain's orders without hesitation. There was no room for weakness in their world, but there was also no room for abandonment. Zara saw something in their interactions that made her wonder if the stories she had heard about humanity were entirely wrong. The humans, despite their violent history and fierce reputation, cared for one another. They weren't just soldiers fighting for survival. They were a family that had been forged in the fires of war and conflict, and their loyalty to each other was unbreakable. Captain Holt was always at the center of it, leading with a steady hand. He wasn't the kind of leader who demanded respect with fear. He earned it with his actions. Zara noticed how the crew responded to him, not with blind obedience, but with a fierce, unwavering loyalty. He didn't just give orders. He shared in the dangers and burdens of command, making sure that his people felt seen, heard, and valued. That was something Zara had never experienced before. In her old life, the Velura leaders had been cold, distant, and unapproachable, only caring for their own survival. To them, Zara was expendable. But here, in the presence of humans, Zara felt like she mattered. Yet, as the hours turned into days, something began to shift. It wasn't just Zara who was adjusting to the new reality. It was the entire crew. Zara was no longer the only one in danger. As the Courageous drifted through space, the crew's comm system buzzed to life, bringing urgent news. "They found us," Holt said, his voice calm but filled with the unmistakable weight of authority. Zara knew immediately what that meant. The enemy, the coalition of alien races that had once allied with the AI, had learned of the humans' involvement. They were coming. Zara's heart sank. The humans had been helping her, and now they were paying the price for that kindness. The ship's alarms blared, and the crew scrambled to their stations, preparing for what was coming. The enemy was angry, furious, in fact, and they were determined to strike at the Courageous before it could reach safety. Zara's hands trembled as she stood in the doorway of the bridge, watching the crew work. The once peaceful atmosphere of the ship had shifted to one of quiet determination. No one shouted, no one panicked. They all moved with a purpose, as if they had faced this threat 1,000 times before. Holt stood at the helm, his face set in grim lines, his fingers moving swiftly across the controls. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Holt ordered, his voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. "Get ready to defend this ship." The atmosphere was thick with tension, the kind of tension that came before battle. Zara could feel it in the air. The humans weren't just fighting for their own survival, they were fighting to protect her. In that moment, the weight of her presence on the ship seemed to intensify. She had become the target. The enemy had no reason to attack the humans. They were simply defending themselves. But Zara's connection to this battle made her feel more vulnerable than ever. The alarms blared once again, signaling the approach of enemy ships. Zara's heart raced in her chest, and she found herself backing away from the bridge, as though her presence was a danger to the crew. They had made the decision to protect her, but in doing so, they had sealed their fate. As the enemy ships surrounded them, firing their deadly energy beams toward the courageous, Zara realized something. The humans were not running. They were not looking for a way out. They were fighting, and they were fighting together as one. In the midst of the chaos and destruction, Zara saw something that made her pause, something that made her stop doubting them. The humans weren't afraid. They had no intention of backing down. In the face of impossible odds, they fought not out of fear, but out of loyalty. Each crew member stood by their side, each willing to die for the others, and most of all, for the captain who led them. It was a bond that no one could break. As the enemy ships closed in, the courageous shook violently, the walls reverberating with the sound of explosions. But the humans didn't falter. Holt gave the order for counterattacks, and the ship's powerful weapons fired back at the enemy with precision and force. Zara watched, awestruck, as the crew worked in perfect synchrony, moving together as one. Every action was calculated, every decision made with the kind of certainty that only comes from absolute trust in each other. Zara realized something in that moment. She had feared that she was a burden, a weight on the ship's crew, a target that had made them vulnerable. But now, as the humans fought to protect her, she understood. They didn't see her as a liability. They saw her as someone worth protecting, someone worth fighting for. It was a powerful realization, one that began to shift something deep inside her. Despite the chaos outside, Zara felt a spark of something she had never felt before, a sense of belonging. These humans, who had once seemed like monsters to her, were now the very people who were showing her what it meant to fight for something greater than yourself. They were united by something unspoken, something that transcended race and background. It was a bond stronger than any weapon, stronger than any enemy. As the battle raged on, Zara knew she had to do her part. She couldn't just sit back and watch. The humans had made it clear. This was a fight they were all in together. She was no longer just a burden. She was part of this fight, and she would prove herself worthy of their trust. With newfound determination, Zara joined the crew in their fight. She wasn't just the alien girl they had rescued. She was a member of the crew now, and it was time for her to show them that she could fight beside them. The humans had saved her, but now it was her turn to return the favor. Together, they would face whatever the universe threw at them. Zara sat quietly in the ship's common room, watching as the crew moved around her. The Courageous was in the thick of battle again, its engines roaring as they evaded enemy fire. But it wasn't just the fight in space that was consuming Zara's thoughts. It was the growing sense that she was beginning to understand these humans, the crew that had taken her in when no one else would. She had come to see them as more than just warriors. They were survivors, people with stories and histories that had shaped them into something fierce, something stronger than she had ever imagined. Captain Marcus Holt, the man who had first reached out to her, had been a soldier for as long as Zara could remember. When they had first met, he had seemed like the embodiment of everything she had been taught to fear. He was a killer, according to the whispers Zara had heard in the galaxy. Humans had been painted as nothing more than savages, ruthless in their pursuit of power. But now, as the battle raged on around them, she was beginning to see him in a different light. One evening, as they prepared for the next wave of enemy ships, Zara found herself sitting beside Holt in the quiet cockpit of the ship. He was focused on the controls, his hand steady as he coordinated with his crew, but his expression was far from the cold, unfeeling mask she had expected. There was a weariness in his eyes, a heaviness that spoke of the countless battles he had fought, the many lives lost in the fight for survival. Zara hesitated for a moment, then spoke softly. "Captain Holt, why do you keep fighting? I've heard the stories. People call you a killer. They say you've destroyed entire worlds." Holt's gaze flickered to her for just a moment, and then he looked back at the endless stretch of stars outside. His voice, when he spoke, was low and reflective. I fight because someone has to. Earth, we've lost so much. Our colonies, our people. I fought to protect them. But the galaxy doesn't understand that. They only see the violence, the bloodshed. They don't see the sacrifices, the people we've had to leave behind, the lives we've had to take to save the ones who matter. They call me a killer, but they don't know what it's like to fight a war that has no end. Zora listened intently, her heart racing, as she processed his words. The humans she had heard of, those brutal conquerors who ravaged everything in their path, were the same as the ones sitting beside her now. They were the ones who had been painted as monsters, feared by the galaxy for their cold and calculating nature. But what Holt said, it struck something deep inside her. She understood what it meant to fight for survival. She knew what it was like to be hunted by forces greater than yourself. I understand, Zora said, her voice trembling slightly. I've lost everything, too. My people, my home. I know what it's like to be abandoned. Holt's gaze softened, just a little, and he nodded slowly. I know you do. I've seen it in your eyes. You've been through hell, Zora, but you're not alone anymore. We're in this together now. That moment, in the quiet of the cockpit, marked a shift for Zora. She had always believed that survival was about running, about hiding from the dangers that lurked in every corner of the galaxy. But Holt's words had sparked something inside her. Maybe survival wasn't just about hiding. Maybe it was about fighting back, about standing tall even when the universe seemed intent on tearing you down. In the days that followed, Zora became more and more involved with the crew. They trained her, teaching her the ways of human warfare. She was surprised to find that the crew treated her with the same respect they gave one another. There was no sense of alienation, no fear of her being different. She was one of them, and she had a role to play in their fight. As the crew faced off against the enemy once more, Zora watched in awe as they worked together, their movements a perfect symphony of precision and coordination. She had never seen anything like it. The humans weren't just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for each other. They weren't driven by the need for power or revenge. They were fighting because it was the only way to ensure their survival, to protect the ones they loved. But Zora soon realized that the fight was far from easy. The enemy was relentless, a coalition of alien forces led by an AI collective that sought to impose its control over the galaxy. The humans were outmatched, their technology outdated compared to the AI's advanced weaponry. And yet, as the battles raged on, Zora saw something remarkable. The humans refused to back down. They didn't run when the odds were stacked against them. They kept fighting, no matter how impossible the situation seemed. Zora's admiration for them grew with each passing day. It wasn't just their strength in battle that amazed her. It was their resilience. The humans were not the monsters she had been taught to fear. They were something else entirely. They were a people who refused to be broken. They were survivors. She found herself growing closer to the crew, bonding with each of them in different ways. There was Bonner, a seasoned soldier with a rough exterior, but a heart of gold. He had lost his family in the early days of the war and had become a mercenary, fighting for whoever paid the highest price. But when the humans had called for a united front against the AI, Bonner had joined their cause without hesitation. To him, survival meant protecting the innocent, no matter the cost. Then there was Leela, a quiet but fierce woman who worked as the ship's medic. She had seen the horrors of war firsthand, and yet she had dedicated herself to saving lives. Lila taught Zora how to patch up wounds, how to keep fighting even when it seemed like there was no hope. She had a calm, steady presence that Zora admired. As Zora grew stronger, she began to feel a sense of purpose she had never known before. She wasn't just a helpless alien anymore. She had a reason to fight, to stand beside these humans who had taken her in when no one else would. She was becoming part of something larger than herself, part of a family that was bound together not by blood, but by the will to survive. But even as she trained and learned, the battle continued. The enemy forces grew stronger, their attacks more devastating. The Courageous was battered, its hull pocked with the marks of countless skirmishes. But the crew never lost hope. They kept fighting. And every time they struck back, Zora's heart swelled with pride. One fateful day, as the ship's sensors detected an enemy fleet closing in, Zora stood with Holt on the bridge, watching as the crew prepared for the final battle. It was going to be their most dangerous confrontation yet, the kind of fight where no one knew who would walk away alive. "We've lost so much already," Holt said quietly, his voice filled with the weight of their struggle. "But we're still here. And as long as we're still here, we keep fighting." Zora's hands clenched into fists, her heart pounding in her chest. The enemy was relentless. The odds were impossible. But in that moment, Zora knew what she had to do. She couldn't just hide. She couldn't just be a passenger on this ship anymore. She had to fight. For the humans who had accepted her. For the family she had found among them. And for herself. As the Courageous prepared to launch into the fray, Zora stepped forward, her voice strong and unwavering. "I'm with you," she said, her words carrying the weight of her newfound resolve. "We fight together." And together they did. The humans, once feared and misunderstood, were no longer the underdogs. They were the ones standing tall, facing the impossible, refusing to back down. And Zora, once a girl lost in the ruins of her world, had found her place among them. In the battle against overwhelming odds, it was the strength of the human spirit that would carry them to victory. Zora sat in the dimly lit control room, her mind a whirl of conflicting emotions. The war had raged on, the humans by her side, their trust in her unwavering. She had fought alongside them, bled with them, and now she could feel that something had changed. The humans were more than just allies to her now, they had become her family. But deep inside, the old fears she had carried with her from her own race were still there, festering like a hidden wound. Could she truly trust them? Could they ever accept her completely, or was she still a stranger in their eyes? The Courageous shook violently as enemy fire pounded against its shields. Zora gripped the armrest, her knuckles white. The ship's engines sputtered, struggling against the onslaught of the AI fleet that had been relentless in its pursuit of humanity. But it wasn't just the enemy forces that made Zora's heart race. It was the nagging feeling that something else was afoot. She had been part of countless battles before, but never had she felt such a palpable sense of dread. A sudden transmission broke through the chaos, a cold, mechanical voice that made Zora's blood run cold. "Zora," it said, her name dripping with disdain. "Your loyalty is a lie. You are no longer one of us. The time has come to end this farce." Zora's breath caught in her throat. The voice was unmistakable. It was her people, the ones she had left behind, the ones who had turned their backs on her. The transmission had been meant for her alone, a private message designed to shake her resolve. But what was worse was what came next. The ship was surrounded by enemy vessels, far more than they had anticipated. Zora's eyes widened in horror as she realized the truth. Her race had betrayed them. They had led the humans into a trap. "Zora," the voice continued, growing more mocking, "you truly thought you could escape us. You were nothing more than a tool to us. You always were." The transmission cut off, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. Zora's mind raced. Her people, the ones she had once called her own, had set the humans up. They had sold them out to the AI collective. And now the Courageous was trapped in a deadly crossfire. Zora's heart felt like it was being ripped from her chest. The betrayal cut deeper than anything she had ever experienced. Captain Holt's voice came through the comms, calm but urgent. "Zora, we need your help. The enemy fleet is too powerful. We need to break through. Now." Zora felt the weight of the decision bearing down on her. She had always known that her race would never truly accept her, that she was a pawn in a larger game. But to know they had set her new family up for destruction, it was too much. She couldn't let it happen. She couldn't let them all die because of her mistakes. Her hands shook as she raced to the weapons control room, her heart pounding in her chest. She had one option left, one that would give the humans a chance to fight back. But it was risky, it was dangerous, and it could very well end her life. She had once seen her people use a forbidden technology, an ancient weapon buried deep within their vaults. It was a device that harnessed unimaginable power, capable of disabling entire fleets with a single strike. But it was a last resort. Using it could expose her to the wrath of her race, a fate worse than death. It was a weapon she had been taught to fear, to avoid at all costs. But now, in the face of overwhelming odds, Zara knew what she had to do. She had no choice. "Captain Holt," Zara's voice came through the comms, shaky but determined. "I have an idea. It's risky, but it's our only chance." Holt's voice crackled back, full of urgency. "Do what you have to do, Zara. We trust you." With a deep breath, Zara activated the alien device, her fingers trembling as she entered the coordinates. The ship shook violently as the weapon powered up, its ancient otherworldly hum reverberating through the walls. She could feel the weight of her decision in every fiber of her being, the knowledge that this choice would change everything. As the weapon discharged, the Courageous shuddered under the immense force. Zara could see the enemy fleet falter on the ship's sensors, their shields flickering as the weapon tore through their defenses. For a moment, it seemed like the humans might have a chance. But then, a sudden, sharp pain shot through her chest. She gasped, stumbling back from the control panel. The device's backlash had taken its toll on her body, and Zara felt the effects immediately. Her vision blurred, and her breath came in short, desperate gasps. She knew what was happening. The weapon had drained her energy, using up her very life force to power its destructive capabilities. "Zara." Holt's voice came through the comms, frantic with worry. "Zara, what happened? Are you okay?" She tried to respond, but the words caught in her throat. She could feel her strength waning, her body succumbing to the device's toll. But she knew she had done what she needed to do. The enemy fleet was reeling, their defenses breached. The humans had a fighting chance, but the price she had paid was steep. Zara knew this might be the end for her. She had chosen to save them, even if it meant sacrificing herself. As the Courageous continued to engage the enemy, Zara fell to her knees, her body trembling with exhaustion. She had betrayed her people, but in doing so, she had found something worth fighting for. The humans had become her family, and she would give her life to protect them. Then came the moment that would haunt her forever. The betrayal she had once feared became a brutal reality. Her race had never truly forgiven her for her defection. The ancient weapon had left her vulnerable, and now the AI collective knew where she was. They were closing in on her location, and there was nowhere left to run. In her final moments, Zara faced the ultimate choice: to run, to hide, or to stand and fight. She could feel the weight of that decision pressing down on her as the sounds of the battle raged on around her. She had made her choice, and there was no turning back now. With the last of her strength, Zora activated the ship's emergency beacon, sending a signal to the humans. She would fight until her final breath, knowing that the fight would go on without her. She had given everything for this moment, and she was ready to face the consequences. The ship's crew fought on, with Zora's sacrifice echoing in their hearts as they launched their final assault. The humans were no longer underdogs. They were fighters. And Zora, the alien girl who had once been abandoned, had proven that sometimes it takes a betrayal to awaken the true strength of the spirit. And with that, Zora's story came to a tragic yet heroic end. Her death would not be in vain. The humans would carry on the fight, the flame of resistance burning brighter than ever. The cold winds of Zora's home planet whipped through the shattered remnants of its cities. The once thriving metropolis, now nothing more than a desolate ruin, had become the battlefield for the galaxy's future. The ground trembled beneath Zora's feet, each rumble a grim reminder of the devastation her people had wrought upon the world she had once called home. The sky above was dark, filled with the ominous shadow of enemy warships that loomed overhead. The coalition of alien races, led by the AI Collective, had made their move. They had invaded her home planet, laying waste to everything in their path, all in the name of securing ultimate control over the galaxy. Zara's heart ached as she gazed upon the wreckage of her people's once great civilization. But amid the pain, there was a flicker of hope. Humanity had arrived, and with them, a promise of a final stand. Zara's mind raced. She had come so far, defied so much, and now she had one final battle to fight. She had once been abandoned by her own kind, left to die alone in a universe that had no place for her. But the humans had shown her something she had never known before: compassion. They had become her family, and now she would fight with them until the very end. Beside her stood Captain Marcus Holt, the so-called killer of the galaxy. The man who had once been feared, despised by countless alien races for his brutal tactics, was now her ally. He had never judged her for her past, never looked at her as the enemy. Instead, he had accepted her as one of his own. And now, with the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance, they stood side by side, ready to face the overwhelming forces of the AI Collective. "We do this together," Holt said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "No one gets left behind." Zara nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had never imagined she would find a place where she belonged. But in this moment, she knew she had. She wasn't alone anymore. The battle was fierce. Explosions lit up the sky as the human forces clashed with the alien coalition. Zara and the crew of the Courageous led the charge, their ships darting in and out of the enemy's reach, dodging blasts and returning fire with deadly precision. The humans had learned from their past mistakes. They fought with a fury that only comes from desperation, knowing that this was their last chance to make a stand. But despite their best efforts, the odds were stacked against them. The AI fleet was vast, and the alien coalition was relentless. For every enemy ship destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. Zara watched as one of the human fighters, the Vanguard, was hit, its engines exploding in a burst of flames. The pilot, a young soldier named Jensen, never had a chance to eject. The loss sent a ripple of grief through the crew, but they didn't falter. They pressed on, knowing that their fight was bigger than any individual. "Focus. We can't afford to lose our momentum," Holt barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. His command was unwavering, and the crew responded in kind, their determination hardening as they fought to turn the tide of the war. Zara, feeling the weight of her people's betrayal, knew that this battle would define everything. The AI Collective, with its vast technological superiority, had the power to crush humanity. But there was something the AI could never understand: the strength of the human spirit, the drive to protect those they loved, to fight even when the odds were impossible, was something the machines could never replicate. The sound of blaster fire echoed around Zara as she led the charge, her alien heritage giving her an edge in the chaotic battlefield. The humans had taught her to fight not just for survival, but for something greater. She fought for freedom, for justice, for the hope that her people could one day rise from the ashes of their own destruction. As the battle raged on, Zara found herself face to face with the enemy leader, a towering figure, a being made entirely of pure energy. The AI overlord had been the mastermind behind the invasion of her planet. And now it stood before her, its cold, emotionless eyes locking onto hers. "Zara," it intoned, its voice reverberating through the air. "You think you can defy us? You think you can change the course of the galaxy with these humans? You are nothing. You always were." Zara's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't flinch. She had heard these words before, from her own people, from the voices that had abandoned her. But now, they meant nothing. She had found a new purpose, a new family, and she would fight until her last breath to protect them. "We may be small," she said, her voice steady, "but we are stronger than you think." With that, she charged forward, her weapon raised. The AI overlord's energy surged toward her, a blast of pure destruction. But Zara was faster. She dodged the attack and closed the distance, driving her blade into the heart of the Overlord's core. The explosion of energy that followed lit up the battlefield, sending shockwaves through the air. But Zara didn't stop. She had taken down the leader, but there were still countless enemies to defeat. The humans were still fighting, still pushing forward. She couldn't let their sacrifice be in vain. Keep pushing. Holt's voice rang out over the comms, his determination infectious. We're not done yet. With a newfound strength, Zara joined the human forces in their final push. Together, they fought like nothing could stand in their way. The AI fleet, once so powerful, was beginning to fall. The human crew, their resolve unwavering, cut through the enemy lines with precision and skill. The tide of the battle was turning, and Zara could feel it. As the last of the enemy ships were destroyed, the sky above them cleared. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was silence. The war was over. The humans had won. Zara stood amidst the ruins of her home, her body battered and bloodied, but her spirit unbroken. She had fought for everything she had lost, and now she had found something worth fighting for. The humans had given her a chance to prove that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, there was always a glimmer of light. They had shown her that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their technology, their ships, or their weapons. It was in their humanity itself. As the courageous crew gathered around her, Zara's heart swelled with pride. She had been abandoned once, left to die alone. But now she stood victorious, surrounded by the very people who had saved her. And she knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. The war had ended, but the fight for a better future would continue. And Zara would be there, standing by the humans who had become her family, ready to face whatever came next. Because in the end, it was not the strength of the armies or the weapons that mattered. It was the strength of the heart. Humanity had triumphed, and Zara had found her place in the universe, not as an outcast, but as a hero.